Welcome to church, ladies and gentlemen. All right, man, I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. As you guys know, we got the Champions Chess Tour final going on in Toronto. Just started today. So they started off with a match of players, and the match that I'm going to show you guys right now is Wesley So versus Hikaru Nakamura. So as you guys might know, Wesley So did win their first game. It's the best of two. So basically first to 1.5 wins the match and then goes on. And so Wesley did win that first game. So in this game, all he needs to do is win or draw and he's good. Nakamura has to win this game though. So he plays like he needs to win. Kind of Bobby Fischer-esque. But anyways, all my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say, Maraming salamat. I appreciate you guys very much. Anybody else from around the world, man. But if you guys are ready to go, see what we got for this game, son. All right, so we got the move D4. In an interview before the game, basically Wesley So was like, I'm going to play D4. And he basically just challenged Hikaru like, you know, do your worst. So we do see knight to F6, very common. We got the move C4. And then we have, let me type this up something. And then we have C5, which you guys are probably familiar with the Benoni. If maybe you haven't seen it, maybe you've heard about it before, but it basically is saying that we're not going to draw. It's kind of like a Sicilian. We're not drawing this game, homie. Like either I'm going to win or you're going to win. So that is the way that Hikaru was playing. In all honesty, the Benoni is somewhat questionable to play. You know, you kind of have to know a lot about it, and it's really easy for white to kind of just start attacking you from the beginning of the game. So it is something that kind of throws players off sometimes. We do see the move D5, and then we see the only break in the position. You know, white has too good of a pawn center, and then E4 is coming. You don't want E5 to come after that. So we do see the move E6 challenging white's center. We got knight to C3, pawn takes D5, pawn takes D5, and then we do see the move D6. You have to prevent white from continuing to expand in the center. As you guys probably noticed, black has given up one of their central pawns for one of white's wing pawns. So they actually have the ability to push both their E and D pawns, which is kind of a dream case scenario. And we do see the move E4. We got the move A6. And one of the reasons that you push A6, you are kind of struggling for space if you are black. So you have to try to expand and get some space somewhere. So usually queenside expansion is what you see. Very similar to like Sicilian type stuff, A6, B5. So one of white's things is to try to stop that and to attack one of black's major weaknesses. We'll get to that in a second. We do see the move A4, just trying to shut down and stop, you know, what black is trying to do. We got the move G6. We got H3. You know, you have to kind of get your pieces developed. So, you know, usually you do see a bishop to G7 for black. It's very thematic. But there's also sometimes some bishop to G4s. And you really don't particularly want that in your position. So we do see bishop to G7. We got bishop to D3. All standard development for the Benoni. We do see castles by black. We got knight to F3, knight B to D7. I mean, there really wasn't anywhere else to put the knight, to be honest with you. Of course, because you don't have your natural C6 square. And then we do see castles by white, and then we have the move knight to H5. And knight to H5 might look kind of strange. You're like, why would I go knight to H5? Like, you're just putting it on the rim. Like, you're not attacking anything. Like, I mean, like, for what? Well, there's two reasons why. One of the reasons is sometimes in a Benoni, black wants to try to lash out with the move F5, and that is one of their pawn breaks in a position. But also, most importantly, the issue that you have when you are black playing a Benoni is this D6 pawn, and you will be seeing this be relevant through the rest of the game. But what white really, really wants to do, their most ideal placement for the bishop, this dark square one to attack, to tickle that weakness, is bishop to F4. So knight to H5 is literally just preventing the move bishop to F4. You kind of would have to go a bishop to G5, back to H4, back to G3 route. Obviously, I mean, you're going to want to try to kick this knight so that it doesn't capture the bishop here. But you see what black is trying to fight against. Very dynamic stuff. Bishop goes to G5, like the idea I was saying. The queen does sidestep to C7, and we are trying to keep an eye on this pawn right here. We definitely don't want to allow a knight here or a knight here, and then you're going to be putting a lot of pressure on this pawn. Knight does go down to D2, kind of doing what I was saying, trying to see if it can get to C4 and add a little bit of pressure to this D6 pawn. Rook goes to b8, in line with the expansion that I was talking about earlier, as far as trying to get, you know, some space on the queen side. And then we do see a5, and this is actually the novelty of the game. It's actually very surprising because a5 is actually a very common move to make in these types of positions when you see that your opponent is trying to expand on the queen side. So it's just really discouraging that you still can play it, but it's really discouraging it because of en passant. So we do see knight to e5. We got the bishop back down to e2. You know, we don't want to lose that bishop. We don't even want to trade it for the knight. We're good. So we got the move f5, the pawn break that I was telling you guys about before. And you do get a little bit of compensation for this, sure, but this does allow white to actually win a pawn. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen takes, and white is one pawn to the good. The thing about the Benoni is even if you're up material, you're really not going to be completely realizing it because of the dynamism that's usually in the position. So even though you do have this pawn, it's only giving you about half a pawn's worth of an advantage. Some of the things after we see b5, like I said, that is the other pawn push. But some of the things that you want to notice is, yes, black has given up a pawn, but they are working to try to free this bishop out of, you know, where it's at. And they are trying to really expand on the queen side. If they can get b4 in, they're going to knock this knight to a square you really don't want to put it on. So they actually have a little bit for the for the sacrifice of the pawn. Bishop does go to h6. Trades are going to favor white quite a bit. Plus, the g7 bishop is one of the best defenders of the king with this structure. So the knight does go down to d3, but Wesley So's like, bro, you can take my b pawn if you want, dog. Like, I don't even care about that, son. So we do see the move f4, and it's pretty straightforward. White is looking for this beautiful rook lift, you know, adding a lot of pressure to this king and making it very desirable to get rid of all these pieces. Pawn takes e4, and then we do see knight d taking e4. And you guys hear me talk all the time about when you go into trades. Sometimes you do give a little bit to your opponent. So if you're white, you're looking at the position and you're saying, hey, man, you know, which one of my pieces aren't really doing a whole lot? Well, it's this knight right here. You know, you have all of your other pieces like in really, really good spots. You're doing a lot of good stuff. And this is really the only piece that you're like, hey, man, I'd like to improve it. Well, this capture on e4 actually helps Wesley So improve his knight. So the pawn takes and then the knight takes. And you see that you're pretty much one of your only problems if you are white has just been solved. So Nakamura kind of helped Wesley just a little bit here. Bishop goes to f5. We see bishop taking g7, queen taking g7, knight taking d6. And you remember I was telling you guys about this d6 pawn. This is always an idea that you have when you're playing against a Benoni. If you can make it be some kind of way that this d6 pawn drops. And what happens as a result is you do have usually a completely passed d pawn. So that is very, very important. We do see bishop to g6, queen goes down to g4. You're basically saying, hey, man, if I could push f5, I mean, we can trade these queens and we can call it a day. So we do see queen to d4 with check kind of getting out of that. The king goes to h2. We see knight taking f4. So, I mean, black has managed to get one of their pawns back. But, I mean, the play is definitely in white's favor. We do see rook a to e1, and then we do see knight to d3. And, I mean, this is a nice little move. I mean, you are attacking this rook down here. You got the queens facing each other. You got these rooks coming down. So, it's a pretty complicated position. So, I asked you guys right here. There is a top move in the position, and Wesley So actually plays this move. If you want to go ahead and try to figure out which move that is, go ahead and do so. Okay, so I think it's actually going to be somewhat hard to find this move though for a lot of people because it doesn't look like it makes any sense visually. But the move in the position is actually rook to e4. Now, like I said, it visually looks weird because you're like, man, the bishop right here. But I mean, you do understand that the bishop is pinned. But like I said, just looking at it, it looks visually like weird. Like, man, that's a crazy move to play. It is heavily protected by these knights. It does force the queen back to only one square. Of course, it's hanging your rook, but you're not worried about it if you can win a queen. So we do see, like I said, the queen going back to g7. That was really the only move. There was really nowhere else for the queen to go. So this was a really, really nice find. Now, with queen to g7, you do unpin this bishop. So you kind of have to do something with your rook now. So we cover it with knight to f5. Bishop takes f5, rook takes f5, and then we welcome definitely this queen trade. Queen takes g4, rook takes g4 with check. King slides over to h8. We got rook taking f8 with check, rook taking f8, and even though you do have some nice material, you are up a pawn, you do kind of have a game going on. It's not like it's just completely one for either side. So that's why I'm saying about the Benoni. It's kind of strange because you can be up a full pawn or even two, and it's like, oh, you're only half a pawn better. And you're like, what? How am I half a pawn better? It's crazy. So we do see knight to e4. We got the move c4. We got d6. And like I was telling you guys before, now you have a completely passed pawn if you are white. So, man, push that bad boy, bro. And then so we do see rook to d8. You kind of have to cover it. We do see knight to f6. Now, I will mention this as a move. Knight to g5 was actually a move. Number one, because rook taking here is a poisoned pawn because of that. But we are setting up a checkmate. If the knight comes to g5 here, and really you do anything that doesn't defend, you got knight to f7, and that would be checkmate because the king is completely cut off. So that was an honorable mention. But we did see this move, knight going to f6 first. And this does actually threaten a checkmate on g8. So it's really strong in its own right. We do see knight up to e5, trying to get a little threat on this rook over here on g4. Like, bro, for real? Is this what we're doing, son? So we just back it up to g3. It was like, bro, I'm not even caring about none of that, dog. So the knight does go to g6, and now we have blocked that threat of checkmate, like I said. So the pawn is capturable on d6. So that is why we see the knight going down to e4, protecting. The king goes to g7. We got the move rook to g5. King goes over to f7. We got rook over to h5. We're basically trying to tell this king, bro, you ain't going nowhere, son. Like, where you think you're going? Your pawn is hanging. So we do see king to e6. We got knight to c5 with check. And you got to be kind of careful in this position. We do see king going back over to f6. But if you're thinking in this position, I'm going to win a pawn. Yes. No! And you are forked, bro. You are forked. I thought I had a pawn. Anyways, man, let's go back to what we see in the game. King goes to f6. So you see Hikaru sidestepping all of that. You got knight back down to e4. Then the king does go to g7. You got the rook over to c5. Because, I mean, you're not really worried about the king side. But, I mean, look at this juicy pawn right here. The rook is like, bro, hey, this pawn look good and I'm hungry. So we do see knight going down to f4. We see rook up to c6. And there's not really a whole lot that you can really do about this pawn. You don't really want to move your rook away because you will be looking at this pawn pushing. So, I mean, we just see the king going over to f7. And we see the dropping of the pawn with rook takes a6. We got king down to e6. Rook goes to b6. We got king down to e5. We got knight going to g5. We got rook down to d7. We see rook going and taking b5 with check. We see king up to d6. And kind of the craziest thing about this game, well, like I said, Wesley So needs a win or a draw, and he wins the match between Hikaru and Nakamura. It is in this position that Hikaru Nakamura offers a draw, and Wesley So accepts. So I ain't gonna lie to you, that's a little bit too nice for me, homie. Like, hey, if I'm up a couple points and we got a little bit of time each, no, I'm pressing for the win, homie. I'm not doing all that draw stuff. But that's all Wesley So needed. So for any of you guys that are wondering, looking at this position, like, wait a minute. Okay, I mean, I see that, yeah, black is down a little bit of material, but I don't see how it's just completely lost for black. Okay, so after king takes d6, you would most likely, almost like, I mean, this is like by far the best move, is knight to e4 with check. And you have a couple different options. You have to be really careful because you don't want to step on like a mine square like this and then allow something like this. And then you have a fork C. And I mean, you really kind of want to keep an eye on this a pawn. So you would most likely see a king to c7. And then after rook goes to c5 with check, you would be looking at maybe the king going to b8. And then you would be looking at rook takes c4. And, I mean, you just see that, yes, black was only down 2 pawns, but in the best possible variation from then, you go on to win another pawn, and you have 4 pawns against 1 pawn, with the minor pieces being, minor and major pieces being equal. I mean, you can't really go into this kind of a game, really, against any of these guys, and think that you're going to actually swindle this, unless maybe you're Magnus, but, yeah, so that is, I mean, you had kind of this win right here. So, man, if I was Wesley, I'd have just took it, bro. I'd have been like, nah, man. Hey, we ain't drawing, homie. Like, here's this move right here. So, I don't know, man. Like, you know. So, that's another draw. So, but, like I said, Wesley So does clinch his spot going forward into the tournament. And so, he defeated, Hikaru Nakamura, which is what he needed. So, I mean, I can see the rationale behind the decision, but all of my people that are coming from the Philippines, I will say mabuhay to you. Kamusta na aking magkaibigan. Masaya ako makikinig muli. I appreciate you guys very much for stopping by. Maraming salamat aking magkaibigan po sa nanonood ng aking mga video. Malaka see Wesley So because you know he was winning, bro. But I appreciate everybody very much for stopping by, and I'm going to see everybody next time.